of sounds that will create either balance or imbalance within the system. And I just want to share one minor detail here with you in terms of the science of this. The physical body experiences the cosmos through actually both the head hair, your locks, for instance, or your hair, which you either sizzle, burn, fry, or keep in a natural state. Because this is like your antenna. The antenna that takes on the vibrations from the cosmos. Now, from the hair into the brain and spinal column or spinal cord, which all of the basic nerve endings then radiate to different parts of the body, your arms, legs, stomach, etc. And sounds, different sound patterns, when it comes to the brain, will affect one part of this spinal column, either one part of the cervical spine, which has 7 in nature. There's several cervical spine, there are 12 thoracic, and then there, how many in the lumbar spine? 5 or 6 sometimes, there's extras. Okay, and then you go on to the coccyx, which is that little part in the bottom that acts as a pendulum. Okay, but all of these items, if you look at these numbers, the next point we'll get to, it'll become important. How many initial planets were there? There were 7 planets, right, initially. How many signs of the zodiac are there? 12 signs of the zodiac. How many elements we looked at? 5, fire, earth, air, water. But all of these actually has to do with certain correspondences within nature, which I will talk about at some other point, but I want to share with you so that some seeds can be planted and you can begin to intone some things for yourself. But sound waves affect this nervous system. The brain, spinal column, meningeal system, and the meninges, is the covering of the brain and spine, right? Certain sound pattern, if it's a drum beat, it will affect you a certain part right around T3 to around T5 that affects both the respiratory system and heart. Okay, and certain violent sounds will affect more of the cervical spine, and certain other sound, rhythm, beats will affect you in the lower chakra areas, as they're called, affecting reproductive function. And if you want to really experience sound patterns, if you go to discotheque, you'll find that certain sounds will move you in certain directions, right? And if you go to church, the sounds move in another direction, right? Okay, so basically, sound pattern affect the nervous system either negatively or positively. So I wanted to just share with you in terms of the natural state of imbalance or harmony, or states of the mind. Lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego come through the senses. And once we are to balance these areas through specific ways that I'll talk about a little later, then natural cause will no longer have an effect or a hold on us. Okay? So the first venerable cause having to do with the elements we talked about, fire, earth, air, water. Natural cause of disease having to do with states of mind, that has to do with the 5 negatives, lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego, affecting us through our senses. Now this is the second part of us that we have to balance. Are you with me so far? Yes. Okay. Now let's look at the third cause of disease. Oh, we're going kind of slow, aren't we? Am I going too slow or should I speed it up? Yeah, okay. That's right, okay. I don't want to be just wrong. What is the third cause of disease? Astral. Astral simply means relating to planets or planetary correspondences. And the ancients had an elaborate system which they used, that I have used since, to talk about the concept of both astropathology, astrophysiology, and basically it's dealing with medical astrology. And I'm going to share with you the basic concepts of how the ancients looked at the astral plane to give us information in terms of balance or imbalance. The ancients said that they are primarily, well, maybe I should start writing over here because I need all the space. There is the sun, there is the moon, there is Mars, there is Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. These are the basic 7 planets that the ancients dealt with when they dealt with the astral region before. And all of these have specific Kemetic names. You know, Sun, for instance, was called Aten Ra. And Aten actually is the name of the boy king who was later called King Tut. Okay, but I'm not going to get into that part of it right now. I just want to share with you the medical astrological correspondences. By the way, the Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn are important. They're important to us as a people, but more importantly to the pagans, who are us. I know somebody would get that. The planet Sun formed later on what the Greeks and Romans call Sunday. The moon planet formed what they call Monday. Mars is Martes, which is, what's Martes? Tuesday, right? You're going to have to go between Spanish and English and stuff here, you know, to get us hooked up. Mercury is Miércoles, which is what? Wednesday. Jupiter is Jueves, which is what? Thursday. Viernes, which is Venus's day, is what? Friday. And Saturn's day, or Sábado, is what? Saturday. So these planets were actually taken to be, names of days were given to these planets, or the planets give names to days of the week. There were actually before 10 days of the week in ancient Kemet Egypt. Later on, we'll find beyond Saturn, there is Uranus, Neptune, and then Pluto. And each of these, they have Kemetic names that I'll be able to share with you at some point in time. Now, these planets also had specific energy patterns related to them. There are 2 types of energy that we have to be concerned here with when we're dealing with our health and healing. First is electrical energy, and then the other is magnetic energy. Electricity and magnetism. That's 2 very important aspects when we are dealing with healing. As a matter of fact, this microphone cannot work without both electromagnetic help. We cannot get electricity without electromagnetic balance. We cannot get telephone without electromagnetic balance. The Apollo can't go to the moon without using big magnets. Okay? But primarily, the astral plane give to us as people either electricity or magnetism. And when we as a people will tune into electricity or magnetism coming from these planets and vibrating with them, then we will have health or ill health. The sun's energy is electrical in nature. It gives electricity. The moon is more magnetic. This electricity is more masculine in nature. It's more male, macho. Moon is more feminine. Mars is also electrical. Mercury is basically, it's a combination of both of them, but it's primarily more magnetic than it is electrical. Jupiter is also electrical in nature. Venus is magnetic in nature, and Saturn is also a combination of both, but it tends to be more neutral. Now, these planets, when they act in harmony within a being, if the sun's energy, which tells, well, I should say first of all that each of these planets have a specific type of energy that it gives to the body. If the sun's energy is radiating well within us, then the pineal gland, we need to have the taping what I'm saying, so I'm going to take a drink in the meantime. That was quick. Now, the planets, they each has a specific effect on one part or another of the being, really focusing on your person. The sun and moon, in actuality, affect the glandular system, especially the pineal and pituitary glands. And I don't have the real time or energy right now to get into the dynamics of that. But this is why the whole concept of melanin, we know that the pineal gland is fed through sunlight, right? And the production of melatonin, which is very beneficial in terms of aiding this nervous system and aiding the brain, the spinal column, meningeal system to be in tune with the self. The sunlight and moonlight are both very beneficial for balancing the pineal pituitary gland and the glandular system in general. And it's because of the electricity and the magnetism. When that is thrown off, then we have some sort of imbalance. Now, each of these other planets have specifics which I am not going to share with you in totality today, but you can write the information down. The sun gives energy to the system in general. The moon helps to determine the rate of the flow of the energy given by the sun. And for those of you who are into electricity and magnetism, that term is known as amperage. The moon is responsible for the body's amperage, or how things flow, either well or not so well. Mars also gives the body energy, but there are two types of energy that Mars is responsible for: sexual energy and business energy. You know, if you go work down Wall Street, you know, sex and business go hand in hand, right?
Sure.
Well, anyhow, that's a Martian factor. Mercury governs the mode of communication, how things go from one position to another position, either from the head to the toe or anywhere in between. So Mercury deals with communication, or the body's communication mechanism. So for instance, arterial and venous blood flow will have to do with Mercury, the communication of those energy. But the rate at which the energy or the blood flows will be determined by the moon. Jupiter governs the body's ability to expand, how things are made larger. Venus specifically deals with the concept of veins. I mentioned venous and arterial before, but the veins come directly under Venus's control. And Saturn governs with restriction, how things are made, how things are restricted. So for instance, if a woman has a fibrous tissue or fibrous growth, fibroids, that comes under, that's called a Saturnine effect, or Saturn is responsible for that growth. If you have excess phlegm that is, congestion, that also comes under Saturn. So each of these planets, in terms of dealing with astral cause of disease, each of these planets will either bring forth balance or imbalance depending on how they affect the system or how the physical body accepts the energy coming from the cosmos to us. Was that clear? Yes?
You said one more time about the planets.
I say the planets are responsible for giving us electrical or magnetic balance. And that electrical or magnetic balance is accepted or rejected by various parts of us. The sun and moon primarily works on the glandular system, and especially the pineal and the pituitary glands. I said the other planets are also very important because they affect certain parts of us more so than other parts. I said that Mars deals with sexual energy and business energy. Hence, the reproductive system also will come under Mars. I said Mercury deals with communication, how things travel from one part to another. Jupiter deals with the concept of expansion. So you see a person with a very large stomach. That's a Jupiterial stomach. Okay, it's not only a bare belly, but it's dealt with. Jupiter deals with, or that deals with how the body becomes expanded. Venus governs veins, or what the kinds of energy that pervades the veins or within the veins comes under Venus. And I said Saturn deals with restriction. Restriction of flow of energy, either magnetic or electrical. So cause or causation, venereal cause, natural cause, and astral cause must be understood if we are to understand how disease actually come about. Are you following me so far? Are we going forward? Is it? Okay.
I had a question I wanted to ask you about.
Yes.
Can you hold your question until question number?
Okay, well, if you can write the question down, it would be real good. And so I'd be glad to come back to this or any other point in the lecture. We will have a question and answer period following my 5-minute talk. Now, there are two other causes of disease which I'd like to share with you. They're deific, D-E-I-F-I-C, and spiritual. Now, this simply means that it's caused by a deity. Gods usually, or goddesses, do not cause or create any disease. But primarily, we have certain design which we design. Like this board is designed for me to write on it. If I take a hammer and bang against it, it will break. It's not its basic design to be hit on. Okay? So primarily on this physical plane, there's either material, physical, the astral, or causal, which are the three parts of the physical unit. We are designed to live a certain way. If we go against that specific design, then certain things happen. And the ancients, they left us specific guidelines to help determine whether or not we are in harmony with this basic design or we are out of harmony. And what tells deific means caused by a deity, or spiritual means spirit cause. The whole concept of ma'at, righteousness and truth, the 42 oracles, the 42 is also called 42 negative confessions. It is also called the declarations of rightness and truth, or the declarations of innocence, the 42 oracles of Ma'at. It is from these 42 oracles that we understand what deific and spiritual imbalances are all about. Now, these 42 oracles are the oracles that Brother Moses got to formulate the 10 Commandments. And interestingly enough, if you are to read, any of you have the book of Coming Forth by Day and by Night, the Egyptian Book of the Dead here right now? Do we have a copy of it? But anyhow, when you go home or wherever you go, and you begin to study the book of Coming Forth by Day and by Night, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the 42 negative confessions is what it's called there, or the 42 oracles of Ma'at, or the declarations of innocence, you will find these, they seem very close to the 10 Commandments. And if they look close, you know that actually they are, that the 10 Commandments were actually taken from here. Because Moses, you do not forget where Moses grew up. Moses lived in Kemet, Egypt. He studied with the pharaohs. He lived in the temples. And these oracles existed for hundreds or perhaps thousands of years before Moses was born. And if you study the 10 Commandments, then you will know what the 42 oracles are about. So I'm not going to get into this, but primarily, if we are to go against the declarations of innocence or rightness and truth, these basic 10 Commandments in actuality, then we would understand the basic cause of disease. So I'm going to leave the causation factor, these 5 causes, to go into some basic diagnosis that the ancients left with us, and then into some treatment modalities to give you some specifics to leave here with. So these are the 5 causes, and again, they are first venereal, relating to the elements. the natural cause of disease relating to states of mind, the astral cause, which has to do with influences coming from the planets, and then the deific or spiritual causes having to do with the 42 oracles of Ma'at, or the declarations of innocence. Now, when we break any one of these laws or declarations, any one of these 5 areas, then illness or disease will show up in this physical body. Is that clear? Okay. As clear as mud. Causation. Now, let's take a look at actually how the ancients diagnosed problems. There are many factors relating to diagnosis. Diagnosis was done in the physical self or the physical body. And again, the physical has matter or material. It has also the astral plane as part of the physical. And the causal, C-A-U-S-A-L, which means mind. These are all part of this physical plane. When we deal with diagnosis, we will have to understand the nature of energy. And we have to understand the concept of energy when we're dealing with diagnosis. Energy was called by a wonderful name that the ancients gave in Kemet, Egypt. They called energy Shephat. And Shephat, when it went into China, was called or is called Ki, Qi or Ki, or also Chi, same thing. Chi, Ki, ancient Kemet called it Shephat, and then it is also called, in East Africa, it is called Pangitami, or Panga, P-A-N-G-A. Panga or Pangitami. And this energy in India, it was also called Ojas, O-J-A-S. So, you can go from one culture to another and you will see the concept of energy, that which gives life to something. When this energy flows from spiritual region down into physical region unencumbered without any problems, then we have good health. When this energy, the Shephat, encounters some problems or stagnation on the astral plane, then something shows up, some problem shows up. If it's a problem on the causal level, something else shows up. Or if it's a problem it encounters on the material plane, then something else shows up. So based on where the energy encumbrance happens, that's where the imbalance will show up. For instance, what is bronchitis? Okay, problem breathing. Well, why you have a problem breathing? Congestion, yes. What?
There's a restriction of the bronchial tubes. That's something.
Okay, restriction of the bronchial tubes. Restriction of what?
Air. It's not enough air in there.
Restriction of air or oxygen. What is air or oxygen?
Energy.
Yeah, it's basically we're dealing with energy or spirit. Spiro, to breathe, right? The Latin word S-P-I-R-O, which means to breathe. Okay? So it's a restriction of this spirit or this energy within the bronchial tubes. All right? And any part of the body, when you go, if there's a problem that shows up there, when this energy is blocked or becomes encumbered, that's when the problem shows up. You cannot have a problem if the oxygen and the blood is flowing well and all of that. Only when the blockage comes of this energy, that's when the problem shows up. Okay? So you must understand the concept of energy. Energy and balance. Those are two key words that you must understand when you start to deal with health. Energy and balance. Now, diagnosis. When we deal with diagnosis, I'm going to make this kind of snappy because I want to get into the last part, which I think is very important. When we're looking at the physical body as far as diagnosis, we can deal with observation by looking and observing certain features, either facially or certain other parts that I'm going to talk about. We can observe. We can also do certain types of mechanical tests like orthopedic neurological exams, have you twist your head, do range of motion studies, turn your head this way, that way, etc. Or we can look at the actual matter that comes from the body. Okay, the exudates, such as urine, feces, your sputum, all of these items to tell exactly what's happening with the body. There's also concepts of looking at the tongue to determine actual diagnostics. We look at tongue, we look at, well, actually, I was trying to draw a tongue, but that didn't look like one to me. Tongue, then there is the iris, the whole concept of iridology or iris diagnosis we need to be familiar with. We need to look at the skin, because that tells you whether or not there's a specific problem happening in this physical body. And we'll look at that. How else will you diagnose things without having, different equipment, like x-rays, etc.? Anyone knows?
Pulse.
The pulse diagnosis, especially in ancient China, this became, and India, the pulse is very important. The actual odor that comes from the system, or the concept of smell, is very important in terms of diagnosis. Listening, okay, which you can either use an instrument or you can actually just listen. So when we're dealing with diagnosis, these are some of the factors that the ancients also brought to us. And if you study the Ebers Papyrus, which is one of the medical papyri in ancient Kemet, Egypt, and I made mention in my book, both Caribbean Medicine and Ankh-Chawate, there's a whole list of ways of doing diagnosis. You have to be through observation. It says, well, I would have to really read it to you. But they observe basically the movement of the person, whether the person walked a certain way, okay, which later on in chiropractic they call maybe a functional short leg because one leg appears shorter than another. When you observe whether or not the hair is white, which may speak of certain types of deficiency. You observe, I said, the skin, whether or not the skin is dry, whether it's moist. And then the ancients claim that both the lungs and the large intestine controls the skin. So for instance, skin problems, they said, are always related to a large bowel problem or a lung problem. So people with bronchitis or any respiratory system ailment almost always have skin problems. So this is how they looked or observed. They observed basically what was happening in the physical body as they also observed planetary movements. So physically, let's look at the pulses. How many pulses are there? Who knows, beside two? Yes. Okay, there's a system known as three-pulse system. And the system, let me draw this for you so that you can also have it. They are found in the radial part of the arm. Right here, radial pulse they're called. Both in the right and left arm. There are three superficial pulses in the right arm, three superficial in the left arm, three deep in the right arm, and 3 deep in the left. So there are 12 pulses altogether that actually takes names from the internal organs. So for instance, on the left hand, we will have the heart and small intestine pulse. We'll have the liver and gallbladder, and we'll have the kidneys and the bladder pulses. These are, when you listen to the pulses, either superficial or deep, you'll be able to tell whether something is wrong with these organs based on the intensity of the beat. And this is left. Okay, this is for the left arm. The right hand or the right pulse also have its rhythm. It has the lungs and large intestine. It has the stomach. It has the circulation and circulation kidney, which also is a duplication of this on the right hand. So when the ancients dealt with pulse diagnosis, that's what they're looking at. And when you go to the physician's office and you listen to your pulse, he's listening for something else. But usually if you go to someone who has studied ancient medical science, this is what they're looking for when they deal with pulse, to determine intensity and determine the actual state of health of these internal organs. So diagnosis by pulse is done in this way. The tongue, as I say, you look for color. If the tongue is white, it appears phlegmy, it means that there is some sort of digestive imbalance going on. If it's too moist, or if it appears red and swollen, it also means that there's a heart problem involved. And it goes on and on there's a whole concept of tongue diagnosis that also I deal with in my works. When we look at the iris of the eye, iridology is taking on great prominence these days. You know, they said the eyes are the windows of the soul. And I just want to share this part with you because this is a science that I think that we all need to become familiar with if we are to experience, you know, some semblance of good health. The iris is the brown part of the eye. The pupil is the dark area found in the middle of the brown part, right? About a third of distance away from the eyes is an area that is known as the autonomic nerve wreath. Now, when we look at iris, right eye or left eye, there are certain markings that we will see. And when you go home, you can look at your eyes. There may be a dark spot or a little black hole or some wiggling lines like this. And each of these areas, this whole body of the iris is a map. And if you understand this map, you can determine whether a person is in good health or whether the person is in ill health. The right eye, for instance, from this autonomic nerve wreath going inwards, we will have information relating to the colon, large bowels, or the small intestines, or also the stomach. So by finding certain markings in certain parts of this eye, you can help determine what's going on with the system, whether the problem is in the colon, small intestine, stomach, and to what degree. The degree is based on the intensity of this dark spot that we find in the eyes. If it's just something like that, a little web, it means that that part of the body is going through a process of healing. If it's very dark and black, it means that the tissues are destroyed. And so the ancients, when they looked at the eyes, by mapping out carefully the iris of the eye, they could determine exactly what's happening with various parts of the system based on these specific markings. You mean the ring that comes over here? That is called an arcus senilis, which is an old person's arc. Usually that comes about when both the skin or the lymphatic and the blood system becomes congested. When that energy or the shafat is not flowing in your circulatory system or in the lymphatic system, that's when this shows up. And also when the skin is not breathing properly. Okay, so by looking at the iris of the eyes, by checking the pulses, by looking at the color of the urine, by dealing with the odors, or aroma, as the case might be, of certain things that come from you, you can help determine whether a person is in a state of health or a state of imbalance. Okay, and these are specific techniques that you need to be taught specifically in class form, and I do teach these things.